Welcome back to Advancio Talks. It's great to have you with us for episode 2, actually. And today I am excited to announce and to introduce our guest, Eric Reimer, that he's the CEO of Healthmap Solutions. Eric is making significant strides into the healthcare technology space, and I think you're going to find his insights really valuable. So I'm going to let him introduce himself in a minute. But let me just tell you that if you caught our first episode, you know that we're all about bringing you meaningful conversations with leaders who are shaping the future of technology. So Eric certainly fits that description perfectly. So in today's conversation, we're going to be exploring how technology is transforming healthcare. We're going to be diving into digital innovation in the medical field and maybe uncovering some insights that might just change how you think about health tech, right? So whether you're a CTO, a tech professional, or simply someone interested in innovation that makes a real impact, this discussion is definitely going to be worth your time. So, all right, let's get started and hear what Eric has to share with us today. Eric, welcome to the show, and please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Carlos. Great to be here. Excited for the opportunity. So my background, Eric Reimer, CEO and co-chairman of the board of Healthmap Solutions. I've been in healthcare services for almost 35 years now. Started as a consultant for a few years, then went to health insurance companies for 4 years, more in strategic and financial roles. Started a VC back in 1999, raised the funds, started some businesses, wrote business plans, and that was really my first taste of entrepreneurship. Then I got a chance to run a division of a public company in 2003 for Magellan Health. Great opportunity. It was my first chance to really run a business. Became the chief growth officer there then as a publicly traded company. And then we bought a company called National Imaging Associates. And that business grew 8 times in 18 months. Managing advanced imaging, taking out waste of the system. And that was my first real taste of running a high growth business. And it was extremely intoxicating. Got a chance to be a standalone CEO for the first time in 2008. Quickly tripled the revenue of the business through to 2011. Had an exit, stayed there for a little bit, but I left in 2013. And then from 2013 to 20, I was the chairman of 4 private equity-backed companies, all high growth, all very successful exits. And in 2020, I had the chance to come from the chairman's role at Healthmap, which I'd been since 2015. I stepped in to be the CEO, and it's been a wonderful experience ever since. I'll touch base on what Healthmap does because we're really proud of the work.
Yeah. Please do, yes.
What Healthmap does is it improves the costs and improves the outcomes of members with chronic kidney disease, of patients that are suffering from chronic kidney disease or end-stage renal disease. And what we really do is we take those members and make sure they're getting proactive care instead of reactive care. So we're getting them to their doctors, taking labs more, informed about their disease state, looking at their diet, making sure they're on the right medications and regimen so that they can avoid very expensive setbacks in their healthcare and go into the inpatient setting, the facility setting. And by doing that, giving people a chance to be much more proactive in their care, you can really take a lot of cost out of the system and greatly improve the outcomes of these folks. You can actually slow down the progression of this disease state. It's really important work. What we do to do all that is we give members really free access to clinicians. So they get a nurse, they can get access to a pharmacist, a social worker, a dietitian, and it's paid for by their health insurance company, who's our customer. The members love it because they get to ask questions of informed individuals, and those people are their advocates. They're trying to get them more healthcare. We're not trying to shy people away from the system. If anything, again, more labs, making sure they're seeing their doctors, the PCPs and the specialists more often, and making sure they get the right care proactively. So the clinicians, then, we also spend a lot of time with the clinicians that they already see. And we help those clinicians by giving them a lot of information about what we see with those members in between their own physician visits. So we make sure that we're giving them advice, we're giving them update on their members, and all that leads to, again, better savings and quality outcomes. And what I'm most proud of is that there's a value prop, a strong value prop for the members, the patients, for the doctors, for the health plans, and it's important in the system not to be trying to take value away from one side to give to the other side. We're really trying to do good and bring value to all the constituents.
Great. Well, that's certainly a very, very complete story of your professional background, your background in business, right? So, and I like when you use the word intoxicating, and I know what you were talking about. It's the thrill of actually producing something of value, putting it into the world out there. So that's great. And I'm glad to hear that you mentioned that. Eric, if I may, and thanks for sharing the story about Healthmap. So I'd like to segue a little bit towards something that was the genesis of this communication that we have. It's about your participation, your involvement with EY Entrepreneur of the Year in 2024, right? So I understand that you were named, national winner in life sciences and health, right? So briefly, can you take us back to that moment when you received the news? What was going through your mind?
Well, I was live. I was in the audience of probably 1,200 people when they made the announcement. Wow. It was really thrilling. Honestly, I was shocked. I didn't expect to win. I had already won as a finalist in Florida, but there were hundreds of finalists that were there at the conference. And when my name was announced, I think I was announced as one of the 3 finalists at that point then for all of the National Award for Healthcare. And I was so excited to be one of the 3 finalists. I was just kind of taking in the moment, and they announced that I was actually the winner. I think I was so stunned I didn't even really hear my name. And then finally my wife kind of shook me and said, I think you won. You better go up there and accept the award. So I had to go up there in front of 1,200 people. It was really well done and exciting, and truthfully was unexpected. I had met so many wonderful people at this conference, hundreds of entrepreneurs telling me their story, and I was just overwhelmed with how successful, how interesting were. And when you hear all of that, you kind of go in with the mindset of it's just an honor to be there, not that you're expecting.
Right. And EY is not just any event, right? So the EY Entrepreneur of the Year Award recognizes visionary founders who create long-term value and I dare to say that shape the future. So what do you believe set your entrepreneurial journey apart in such a competitive field to win this award?
So it's interesting. This year, I'm actually a volunteer judge. And so I'm getting to see it from both sides, and I probably have even a different take now than at the time, because now I've sort of seen the thoroughness of the application process and the evaluation and what the judges go through. And I guess the first thing I would say is there are more qualified people than there are awards. You go through it and you realize how many really wonderful stories there are, and that aren't even getting to, we just did the Florida winners, that aren't even getting to be the local winner, as opposed to before you get to the national winner. So then you've really got to capture someone's attention. It's like getting into the top schools in the country. There's probably 10 people, qualified for every person they can take in. So how do you capture their attention? What do I think captured my attention? I think, first of all, being the CEO of 2 independent companies and then chairman of 4 different companies, all successful, all in healthcare services, but very, very different, I think really struck a chord that, it wasn't like I had an expertise in kidney and had 5 or 6 successful stints as a kidney disease manager. That really, I'd been involved in so many different things. I think that was a bit unusual, and to have that consistent success. and being able to grow and scale so many companies, I think stood out. I think the second thing that stood out is the mission of Healthmap. I think there's a lot of great companies, but when you start talking about how you're helping hundreds of thousands of people get better healthcare and you're showing improved outcomes and lower costs, and the vision really for Healthmap is ultimately what we're doing is really for kidney disease members, but overall we can, in the future, we can expand this to look at other chronic diseases, and it can change the whole way that healthcare really manages chronic disease. And I think that big vision made a big difference. I think the differentiated strategy makes a huge difference. Again, there had been people that were doing things that were similarly done before, just a little bit better. I think the idea that we were approaching something with technology, using it extremely differently than anybody had really approached it, I think was intriguing to folks. And then the growth rates, the business had grown 10 times in a couple of years with strong unit economics. And I think to see that growth really stood out. And then the last thing I would say is that value prop to all constituents. I think, what they're looking for is enduring value. Are you really going to be able to continue that kind of growth and impact into the future? And again, knowing they were very curious about how do the doctors feel about this? How do the members feel about this? How the health insurance think about this? And I think that putting that all together really made a big difference overall.
Great. Yeah, definitely. Okay. So I'd like to touch a little bit about your, let's say, your entrepreneurial journey and leadership philosophy, so to speak. Okay. For example, at CareCentrix, you tripled company revenues. It's not a small feat, right? And at a National Imaging Associate, you achieved 800% revenue growth. So, what's your secret sauce, would you say, that for scaling healthcare companies so dramatically?
I think the first thing you need is a really strong value proposition. It's got to hold together. Again, it's got to be financially strong, and you've got to have proof points. I think that fuels the growth, but then you've really got to be able to scale it and execute it. And I think making sure that you have a strong team that really complements your strengths and weaknesses. I have a vision and a sense for product and value prop and finance, but I'm not a technologist. I'm not an operator. I need the best people in those areas to work with. And I recognize that. I think some people want to think they're great at everything. I think to be a successful entrepreneur, you have to be at least good at everything. You have to have a couple of things you're exceptional at, and then you've got to really complement your skills. And I think teams are like portfolios of stock. You want them to be complementary, and think of it as a portfolio. Everybody's got to have a little bit different strengths. And I think that's really important. So the first thing I do at all these companies is bring in a tremendous all-star team, people that could be running their own businesses, but they want to get on board with a bigger vision. In many cases, these are people that I've worked with before that want to continue to work together because we treat people well. We have a lot of fun together, a lot of success together, and that makes a big difference. I think you also really need from day one to design a business model that acknowledges scaling challenges and keeps that in mind from the beginning, and then simplifies things as they go along when possible. I think too many times people feel like I'm not worried about automating this. I just want to be successful for this pilot or this small population, but then it's really hard to scale. I think we go into every business, me and the team I surround myself with, thinking through how are we going to execute this if we're 10 to 20 times bigger. And I think that means investing in the platform ahead of growth, investing in the team, and again, making sure that there's enough appeal, a big enough market that you really have that room to grow.
Great, definitely. What advice would you give healthcare entrepreneurs, for example, that are just starting out their journey, and especially those looking to build scalable solutions, for example?
Yeah, when you go back to when you say just starting out their journey, I think of really people just starting out their career. And
Mhm.
it's funny, I think this generation, too many people that are starting out their career, in some ways it sounds great. They're focused. They know exactly what they want to do.
Mhm.
And I think sometimes that could be limiting. I look at my background when I was a consultant and in insurance and then VC and then running P&Ls. I had a lot of different experiences. I had a lot of different viewpoints, and honestly, there was no. I followed great people and really interesting companies. Then, and it's as opposed to kind of trying to solve it all from day one and just work it backwards and reverse engineer. And I feel like many people go path and they get really good opportunities. I got involved in 2 turnarounds, learned a ton of it in those turnarounds, and it probably wouldn't have checked the obvious box of that's the step for a high growth entrepreneur. But I think it showed me a different perspective and gave me skill sets. So I'd say you need to be a little patient. You need to
Mhm.
let those opportunities come to you. Follow great people, and the opportunity will present itself at the right time. I talk to some people. I go back to the Wharton School where I graduated, and I'll talk to a lot of the students. And sometimes we'll talk to them about jobs. And some people say, I want to be in the C-suite from day one.
Mhm.
And sometimes you need to be a little humbled, and you need to learn and be patient. That doesn't mean forever, but you need to take that time, and you need to surround yourself with mentors, and your time will come. So I would just mention that. I think for entrepreneurs, so they're a little later in your career. I think again, I think there is a tendency to try to fund everything kind of from paycheck to paycheck, hire the right team from exactly in the time you need it. And
Mhm.
if you're too precise, you could really risk the challenge of you finally catch the car, so to speak, and you don't know what to do when you catch it because you just don't have the team in place, you don't have the platform in place. So you're going to have to lean in a little bit, and that oftentimes means finding funding, or getting people to come on board, believe in the vision, have them work with early equity. But I encourage people to make sure they're playing for success and planning for success as opposed
Mhm.
to waiting, and then trying to get that team on board because it may be too late.
Mhm. Definitely. Yeah. Uh, when you were saying this, I heard something that resonated with me. It's about being humble, right? And in some cases, some people have a hard time doing that. And life makes sure that you get your slice of humble pie at one point or another, right? And that's a learning lesson. So, regardless of the space in which you are, okay. So now I'd like to touch, and this is because we have limited time, unfortunately, but I'd like to touch a little bit about the technology side of the equation, of the conversation. So tell me something. Healthcare is becoming increasingly digital. Okay, so how would you say that technology has transformed the way that you approach benefits management and patient care at, for example, at Health Map Solutions?
Yeah, we take in so much data, that 20 years ago, 10 years ago, in businesses I was involved, we would never have been able to get the rich data that we're able to get access to. So you've got to be able to take in all that data, but then you've got to sift through the noise and say what's relevant. We were always fueled by data here to really determine, for each patient, what was the best course of treatment option. We could never really build what we're building without great technology, because what we need to do, it goes back to scalability, we need to have customized plans for folks based on their own specific conditions, because the members we treat have very different underlying conditions. They all have comorbidities, and we are responsible for really attacking their comorbidities. So we have to know everything about them, and then we have to be prepared to help them throughout the various diseases and conditions that they have. And
Mhm.
so it's got to be customized, but you got to do it at scale, or you're just going to have too many people and you're not going to be able to provide it at a cost that can provide a return on investment. So we've always been fueled by that. Now we've acquired a company called Carium, and Carium is a company that was built to do really digital engagement on behalf of providers to stay close to their patients. What information did providers really want from patients on a daily routine where they could get their weight, they could get their blood pressure, they could get them to talk about how they slept, what meds they took the night before, what diet were they on, et cetera, and also to facilitate two-way communication between members and their provider. And so we bought that company. We're now integrating it into our kidney management. But it's really the difference between getting a daily touch point with folks. Again, let's say we have competitors that try to do every touch point by sending a nurse into their home. Mm-hmm. And maybe they could do that 4 to 6 times a year at tops. We're able to, really have real-time impact on members every day. And then we can complement it with phone calls and video calls, and it's sometimes a home visit. But to have that persistency of message you can do with technology, things that you could never do with just humans. Now what we really see is AI, obviously, is coming into the picture. Yeah. And right now, the first stage is to use AI to simplify all the administrative tasks that our clinicians do so that they can spend their time giving clinical advice to patients, which is what they should be doing. That's what they trained to do, not taking down notes and preparing summaries of their calls. Now we can do a lot of that through AI, and we continue to roll out use cases. We're starting to do more of using AI to determine the next best action that a patient we should have with a patient or provider. We're starting to do really interesting things around having AI monitor and grade and even guide the interactions with a clinician and a patient to say, hey, you forgot to mention their meds, or you should ask about this, or, why don't you touch on this? That's pretty exciting. Now, we haven't rolled that out yet, but we basically built the capability. We're going to start rolling that out. Mm-hmm. And that gives us an ability to really listen in and make sure that every clinician interaction with our patients is valuable, and that every clinician can learn from the feedback that they can get from each call. Today, especially in a virtual workforce, we have nurses that are off on their own, and it's hard for them to get feedback. It's hard for us to assess the quality of each and every interaction. We audit certain calls. Here we have an ability now to do every call. That's really exciting. I think in the future, we are going to see that within healthcare, people are going to use AI bots to give simple clinical advice. Now, we don't want to be on the cutting edge of that. We want the providers and the health insurers to begin doing some of that, so that people are kind of introducing that to some of the members. But we want to be fast followers there, and we want to, once we see that members and patients, I go back and forth, members and patients, but once we see that those folks are getting more and more comfortable with that, we'll take advantage of that opportunity, and again, make sure that our clinicians are spending their time on the most impactful interactions.
Great, yeah, definitely. So tell me something. You have led companies through significant growth phases. How important is having the right tech talent and IT infrastructure in scaling healthcare organizations?
So for me, it's always been critically important because, again, it's not my area of expertise, and yet I embrace technology. I know how important it is. And so again, one of my most important hires is a lead technologist. I think today, though, it's really everything, right? There's so much innovation and change going on in technology that you really need that leader and that team. And even, again, I talked about the portfolio of skills you want across your company. You need that even in your technology shop, right? So I want the person who's seasoned, that's done it before, that has grown and scaled. And yet, if you're looking at someone who's done it for 20 to 25 years, they may not be at the cutting edge of AI. So we hired, a person, for example, that came from Amazon and did a lot of their AI. And so, you really need to complement the team with people that are cutting edge, that have done it before. You also need to, I think it's great to have people you absolutely need help people with healthcare experience. But I think because healthcare is not the most advanced industry, you need to bring in some people from other verticals that have seen what cutting edge solutions are out there. And I think more than ever before, getting the right group of people in your technology shop is critically important.
Great. We're approaching the final segment of today's show. Unfortunately, time flies when you're having fun, right? So, I would like to ask you the following. So, the show's sponsor, Advancio, the company talks about engaged experts with passion, hunger, conviction, and purpose. And these qualities, the way I see it, is clearly describe you. So, how do you cultivate these traits in your teams and organizations, if I may ask?
I think the first thing you have to do is lead by example. You want people to be creative and work hard and make suggestions with that they brainstorming is encouraged, etc. You've got to show that you're open to all those things yourself, and you bring those values to the table. And I feel like I very much am able to do that. Then I think you really need disciples. I mentioned before, I'm thrilled that half of my senior team I've worked with before. These are all people that frankly could be running their own businesses. They've had great success themselves. They've had great wealth creation, but we want to do it together. That sends a massive signal to other people. When people are all, humble and are willing to not play up to their ego and work together on a team versus being the one and only leader of an organization, people want to know more about that organization. We hire great people and we treat them well. And if we didn't treat them well, they wouldn't keep coming back. And I think that having those people when you're not in the room that can go down 2-3 levels, that have worked with you before, that know what you value, and that you've seen their values up front in both success and difficult times, is so critical.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for elaborating on that. And finally, there's one more thing that I would like to ask you is for our listeners and our viewers who are or could be or are planning on being aspiring entrepreneurs or current healthcare leaders, what is the one piece of advice you wish someone had given you at the start of your journey? And let's close with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say follow the best people, surround yourself with the best people. It sounds trite, but I wouldn't even say just in business, in life. Your friends, the people you associate with, you get lifted by certain people, you get inspired by certain people, and there's certain people that bring you down. And if you can surround yourself with the best people, I think I've joined bankrupt companies with great people that I wanted to work with and had great success. And you could over evaluate, a company. People, I think, tend to do that. I remember as a consultant, there would be, a consulting project for Pepsi Cola, or there could be a consulting project for a community bank. And everybody wanted to run to the sexy project. The most important thing is, what manager are you going to work for? What partner are you going to work for? And I think typically that's the best indication that there's real value creation opportunities if you surround yourself with the best people. And I think when you do that, you'll find that, if you're tolerant and you're flexible and you find ways to keep that great talent around, because you have to. If you're going to find somebody who could be a CEO on their own and ask them to be in, reporting to you in an officer role, you're going to have to, again, humble yourself. I want people that are going to challenge me, that are going to tell me when I'm wrong. I'm not surrounding myself with yes people. And that means, you've got to be open to that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Eric, what can I say? I mean, it's been a great pleasure to have you here on the show. I mean, the lessons learned, I'm sure they're going to be resonating for a long time because, folks, viewers out there, we are doing this live. This is a live show, but we're recording it. So please be on the lookout for a lot of goodies out there that are going to be shared through social media, both on Advancio's social channels and also, of course, Healthmap Solutions. Um, well, Eric, the only thing left for me to do is just thank you big time for having been with us in the show.
Really my
Uh,
pleasure.
yeah, absolutely. We look forward to some other time doing it again. And before we go, let me just tell you really quick for the viewers out there and listeners that we are lining up a great and incredible roster of upcoming guests. Uh, I normally announce the next week's guest, but we're still in the process of confirming a couple of participations. So at the risk of not being accurate, please stay tuned for instead on advancio.com/tech-talks. It's right there on the screen, folks. Just keep an eye on our website. It'll be right there. The calendar is going to be up there, and also stay tuned for our social media channels for our upcoming conversations about EY and the people who made that possible, and the stars of who were shared the stage on EY 2024. So Eric, again, thank you so much. Please stay with me as we go off the air. And folks, see you next time, next Wednesday, right here on Advancio Talks. See you next time.
Thank you.